Yo, what's up? Welcome back to another episode of the SWAS Monday Night Football. We got two games, going to go through both of them. As far as my NFL Sunday, I had a good one. I think I'm about even on the day, but my top bet hit, which was the over in the Cardinals-Patriots game. And the way that hit was awesome. 28 points scored in the fourth quarter. So, I guess it was a sweat. We're kind of lucky to get it at the end. But at the same time, at halftime, the score was 13-3, and it should have been 21-14. So we got screwed on a bunch of possessions early. We deserved that one. So the top bet hit. Been a fun day. Two games. Monday Night Football. Let's do it. Welcome to the SWAS. Hey, get the sauce. First up, we got Chicago on the road in Minnesota. The Vikings are laying 7 points at home. Total sitting at 43.5 or 44, depending on your sports book. Let's take a look at the pie charts, and according to the data, action seems to be coming in pretty heavily on the Minnesota side. Over 70% of the tickets, over 75% of the money. As I always say, take this data with a grain of salt. So let's get into this one, and we'll start with a quick trend. Actually, the Bears have had success going on the road to Minnesota. They're actually 4-2. Their last 6 trips out here, 4-2 against the spread. So betting the Bears on the road in Minnesota has been profitable. That being said, we're not interested in the past. Let's talk about this matchup here. We'll start with the Bears offense against the Vikings defense. And look at the graphics. On one side, there's a lot of red. On one side, there's a lot of green. The Bears offense, 32nd, dead last in yards per play, 25th in success rate. Vikings defense, 8th and 4th. So no question, Vikings defense with a huge edge in this game. You didn't need me to tell you that. If you've been watching the Red Zone channel this year, you already know that. Obviously, when we're talking about the Vikings defense, we need to talk about the blitz packages. Brian Flores is sending them. They're first in the NFL in blitz rate. The big number that jumps out at me from this graphic is at the bottom left here, 31.1%. 41st in the NFL in pressure to sack rate. Caleb Williams has a habit of holding on to the football too long, taking a lot of sacks. That's not good. We're going on the road to play the Minnesota Vikings. Vikings, like I said, first in blitz rate, 11th in pressure rate, 12th in adjusted sack rate. Now, we do have to give the Bears some credit. The offensive line has done a better job as of late. Since Week 11, Caleb Williams has played a little bit better, and this might be the reason right here. Since Week 11, Caleb Williams has been pressured on just 27.7% of his dropbacks, which is just the 29th most in the NFL. So Caleb Williams has actually been one of the least pressured quarterbacks in the NFL in the last 4 games. So the offensive line has done a better job protecting Caleb Williams, and Caleb Williams has done a better job getting the ball out, which is huge here. Also, we mentioned the Vikings lead the NFL in blitz rate. Well, Caleb Williams has actually been better when blitzed. He's 26th in completion percentage, 23rd in yards per attempt, 21st in passer rating when blitzed. When not blitzed, he's actually one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL. So, all right, maybe this is looking like a pretty good matchup for Caleb Williams. You add on the fact that he actually played pretty well against Minnesota in Week 12 just a few weeks ago, 32 of 47. So he dropped back to pass 47 times in the game, 340 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks, a passer rating over 103. So he did play well against this Vikings team just a few weeks ago. So again, maybe this is looking like a pretty good matchup for Caleb Williams, but here is where I start to get concerned. Braxton Jones has been ruled out of this game. That's the Bears left tackle. They're already missing Ryan Bates, which is not new. He's missed most of the year. So now the entire left, well, actually Ryan Bates, I think technically he's the center. He can play both. But the point is you're now missing 2 starters from that Bears offensive line, one of them being the most important piece there at Braxton Jones, or one of the most important pieces, let's say. Matt Pryor's pretty good. Darnell Wright's pretty good as well. So they're now missing 2 starters from the offensive line here. Don't like that at all. Also, the Vikings, as we know, run a ton of cover 2, ton of zone coverage, first and 2 high safety frequency. Caleb Williams has been pretty terrible against cover 2 this year. 32nd in completion percentage, 33rd in yards per attempt, 28th in passer rating. I will say since Week 11, where he started to play better, it doesn't look nearly as bad, though. 13th in completion percentage, 24th in yards per attempt, 19th in passer rating. So it hasn't looked quite as bad in the last 4 weeks. And like I said, he did play well against Minnesota in the last game. Same goes for his numbers against 2 high safeties. On the full year, it's terrible, but since Week 11, it is better. It's not great, but it is definitely better. 23rd, 26th, and 12th. So maybe it's not an absolute terrible matchup for Caleb Williams. It scares the shit out of me, those two missing offensive linemen, but I think there is a path to Caleb Williams making throws in this game. The Vikings may be without Steph Gilmore. We don't know that for a fact. He did practice on Saturday, but he didn't practice the rest of the week, so we'll have to wait and see. He's listed as questionable, and that's crucial. Did you see how this Minnesota pass defense looked last week without Steph Gilmore? Now, they won the game. Kirk Cousins gave him a couple picks, but 9.3 yards per attempt, 344 yards allowed through the air, success rate per dropback over 55%. Obviously, the pass rating looks good because Kirk Cousins gave him a couple picks, but the thing with Caleb Williams is you can criticize a lot of his game, and obviously he's had some problems this year, but one thing he doesn't do is get frazzled and turn the ball over under pressure, which is exactly what Kirk Cousins does. He's actually 4th in the NFL in turnover-worthy play rate under pressure. He basically just takes sacks. He doesn't put the ball in harm's way. So Kirk Cousins gifted Minnesota a couple picks. Caleb Williams probably won't do that. And another thing I want to mention about Caleb Williams is if I was recording this 3 or 4 weeks ago, I would say this is a very bad matchup for Caleb Williams because earlier in the year, all he was doing is dinking and dunking. He was throwing the underneath throws, wasn't throwing the ball downfield much. When he tried it, it didn't look good at all. So when you pointed this Vikings defense 3rd in DVOA against the short pass, that would have been a terrible matchup for Caleb Williams earlier in the year. But if you isolate it to just the last 4 weeks, Caleb Williams is throwing the ball downfield more. So this doesn't scare me as much as it would have a month ago. Like I said, I think it's a pretty decent matchup for Caleb Williams here. He had a good game against the Vikings a few weeks ago. That was at home in Chicago. Now on the road indoors. I think he can have a decent game throwing the ball in the Vikings defense. What about the run game, though? Because we know this Bears offense cannot run the ball at all. Will Caleb Williams have any run support in this game? Well, the good news for Chicago is Ivan Pace Jr. is still out, inside linebacker for the Vikings. One of the most important pieces on that Vikings defense. He's one of the highest rated defensive pieces against the run in the entire NFL this year. PFF has him 7th in run defense grade, 1st in run stopping percentage. And we've seen the difference. He's been out 2 games now, and we saw the Vikings defense go from what was probably the best run defense in the NFL to looking like shit against the run. In their last 2 games without Ivan Pace Jr. on the field, they allowed 156 rushing yards per game, over 4.8 yards per carry, success rate per rush over 48%. So they've looked like a straight up bad run defense in the last 2 weeks. And this was one of the best run defenses in the NFL for most of the year. This guy is an important piece of the defense, and not having him is huge. Now, the good news for Minnesota is the Bears can't run the ball at all. I mean, they haven't really been able to run the ball this entire season. That hasn't changed recently. Caleb Williams is playing better, but Bears' run game really still isn't shit. I mean, in the last 4 games, 4.4 yards per carry isn't terrible, but 100.8 rushing yards per game. Look at the success rate, under 30% per rush. So this is not a run game I trust. The Vikings' run defense may be bad. Maybe it's not nearly as good as it was earlier in the season. Maybe not having Ivan Pace Jr. on the field makes that big of a difference, but I still have zero faith in the Bears' run game. And then you add on the fact that they tend to run more gap concept blocking schemes, actually 6th in the NFL in gap concept blocking scheme frequency. That plays directly into the strength of Minnesota's defense. They're 2nd in yards per carry allowed, 5th in success rate per rush against gap concept blocking schemes. So no, even without Ivan Pace Jr. on the field, I do not expect the Bears to be able to run the ball in this game. Caleb Williams is probably going to be on his own here, but like I said, I do think he'll have opportunities to make some throws. Now, what do we think about the matchup on the other side? We got the Minnesota offense against the Bears defense. Chicago 29th in yards per play allowed, but 10th in success rate. That's actually all right. Minnesota's offense, though, very dependent on the pass. The run game has kind of disappeared. They're still 9th in the NFL in yards per play, 11th in success rate. One of the best passing attacks in the NFL, as I'm sure you know. Sam Darnold's been great, and he seems to be back. Had a little bit of a rough patch there. Last 4 games, Sam Darnold's looking all the way back. Now, we know the weakness of this Bears defense has been defending the run. That's been the case all season. I will say they have been a little bit better, though. I mean, you look at their last 5 games, 4.6 yards per carry allowed, over 140 rushing yards per game allowed. That doesn't look all that great. But you take out the Lions game on Thanksgiving and look at their last 4 games without the Lions game in there. 4.3 yards per carry allowed isn't bad. 39.4% success rate per rush is actually pretty good. So the Bears' run defense, it's not good. I don't have any faith in it. I will say it has been better as of late. And like I said before, the Vikings don't have a rushing attack that I particularly trust. They started off the season with a couple good games in a row. It was looking like Aaron Jones was going to have this monster season. Since then, I mean, look at the last 9 games. Okay, maybe you could say in the last 3 games it's gotten a little better. 5 yards per carry, 43.3% success rate per rush. But as a whole, I mean, the last few months, Vikings haven't had a run game that I really trust. And with the Bears' run defense playing slightly better, I wouldn't trust Minnesota to run the ball in this game. But there's a but. Gervon Dexter Sr. has been ruled out for Chicago, and that's a huge loss because they're already missing Billings. He's been out for, I want to say like a month and a half. Billings has been out, but now Dexter's out as well, which means they're missing both their defensive tackles, and Dexter's actually their highest rated interior defender this season on Pro Football Focus. So this is already a defensive line that struggles to stay on the line of scrimmage to begin with. They're 29th in adjusted line yards, dead last in yards before contact. You add in the fact that they're now missing both defensive tackles, and this Vikings offensive line is going to be able to generate a ton of push. So this Vikings run game, I don't trust it at all. But the Bears' run defense missing both of those tackles, Minnesota should probably be able to run the ball in this game. Now, you might be looking at this graphic thinking, Kyle, what about the Bears' pass rush, though? They're 3rd in pressure rate, 14th in pass rush grade against a Vikings offensive line that's 23rd in pressure rate allowed. What about the Bears' edge rushers? They're still healthy. They're going to be able to put pressure on Sam Darnold in this game. Yeah, probably, but here's the problem with that. Number one, Sam Darnold's been one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL handling pressure. He does take sacks. He's 35th in pressure to sack rate, so the Bears probably will be able to register a couple sacks in the game. But look at Sam Darnold's numbers under pressure. He's 1st in the NFL in yards per pass attempt under pressure, 2nd in passer rating under pressure. In fact, his numbers when pressured are actually better than his numbers when given a clean pocket. His numbers when given a clean pocket, 8.5 yards per attempt, 107 passer rating. When pressured, 8.7 and 109. He's legitimately been better under pressure this year, and it gets even crazier than that. Look at the turnover-worthy play rate. It's higher when given a clean pocket. 39th in turnover-worthy play rate when given a clean pocket. He actually protects the football when pressured. It makes no sense at all, but the numbers don't lie. Sam Darnold's been great under pressure this year. Not to mention, the Bears' pass defense, isn't this supposed to be the strength of the defense? Isn't this supposed to be one of the strengths of the team? What the hell happened to it? They are getting roasted through the air. In their last 4 games, they're allowing over 287 passing yards per game, 10.3 yards per pass attempt, over 59% success rate per dropback, and an average opponent pass rating of 114.5. They have truly looked terrible trying to defend the pass recently. Not to mention, want to take a look at the coverage matchups here for Sam Darnold? Spoiler alert, if you're a Minnesota fan, you're really going to like it. So Chicago runs a ton of cover 3. They're 2nd in the NFL in cover 3 frequency, 5th in single high safety frequency. So they run a lot of cover 3, a lot of single high safety looks. The reason I'm bringing that up, Sam Darnold just so happens to be one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL against cover 3 so far this year. 7th in completion percentage, 1st in yards per attempt, 5th in passer rating. Against single high safety looks, it's somehow even better than that. 5th in completion percentage, 2nd in yards per attempt, 2nd in passer rating. So Sam Darnold's been one of the best quarterbacks, if not the best quarterback in the NFL against the coverages that the Bears run. Not a great look there if you're a Chicago Bears fan. And also, these two teams just saw each other, and Sam Darnold played great in the game. 22 of 34, 330 yards, 2 touchdowns, passer rating over 116. That was week 12. It was just a few weeks ago. And like I said, Sam Darnold had that really rough game against Jacksonville. He was throwing picks for a stretch there. But in the last 4 games, he's been on fire. 293 passing yards per game, 9.3 yards per pass attempt, success rate per dropback over 68%, an average pass rating over 123. Sam Darnold's been absolutely cooking. Like the matchup here against the Chicago defense, I even think the Vikings can run the ball. So where does that leave me in terms of placing a bet? Well, as you probably guessed, I like Minnesota here. I actually didn't lay the 7, though. I took the Vikings team total over. I got it at 25.5. I also put a few dollars on the over at 43.5 because I do think Caleb Williams can make some throws, but the real angle I like is the Vikings to score points. I wouldn't be mad if you can find a 6.5. Take a Vikings minus 6.5 either. I think they can run the ball. I think Sam Darnold's going to make some big plays. So yeah, I'm on the Vikings here. Team total over, full game total over, and Vikings minus 6.5. I didn't bet it yet. May throw a few dollars on it next game. Falcons on the road in Las Vegas. We got the Raiders catching 5.5 points at home. Total sitting at 44.5. Let's take a look at the pie charts, and according to the data, action's coming in heavily on the Atlanta side. Over 90% of the tickets, over 70% of the money. as I always say, take this data with a grain of salt. So let's get into this matchup briefly. I mean, this is a really tough one to try and handicap and place a bet on. We'll start with the injury reports for the Raiders. That's kind of the lead story here. It's on the defensive side is Max Crosby. That's the big breaking news. But Aiden O'Connell is also listed as questionable, and he hasn't practiced all week. So we don't even know if Aiden O'Connell is going to be playing quarterback in this game. Gardner Minshew is out. So we might see Desmond Ridder at quarterback. And the difference between Aiden O'Connell and Desmond Ridder may not seem that significant, but it is. I mean, Desmond Ridder just can't play. He can't be a starting quarterback in the NFL. I mean, he might not even be a backup quarterback in the NFL. Aiden O'Connell has shown us he's capable of playing the position. So if Aiden O'Connell doesn't play, it's hard to have faith in this Raiders offense. And it kind of sucks because as far as the rest of the Raiders offense, they're as healthy as they've been all year. Madison is healthy. Sincere McCormick, that kid, they like him a lot. He might even be RB1 now. The offensive line is as healthy as it's been all year. So the rest of the Raiders offense is in pretty good shape. Michael Mayer was banged up for most of the season. He's healthy. The rest of the Raiders offense is in pretty good shape. And if Aiden O'Connell plays, I don't think it's crazy to have a little bit of faith in the Raiders offense. But if he doesn't play, just can't do it. And on the other side of the ball, I mean, I'm sure you've heard the news. Max Crosby needs season-ending surgery. So add him to the list of starters on this Raiders defense that are not active. It's a crime scene here on the defensive side of the ball for the Raiders. The crazy part is they've actually been playing, I'm not going to say good defense, but the Raiders defense hasn't been practical joke bad at all. In fact, on the season, they're 12th in the NFL in yards per play allowed, 21st in success rate. They've been playing the run pretty tough as of late, even though last game the Bucs ran all over them. But this Raiders defense hasn't been nearly as bad as the offense. Thing is, this Falcons offense, we know there's a lot of talent there. They're 9th in the NFL in yards per play, 7th in success rate. So do we think the Raiders defense can make stops here now that you add Max Crosby to the list of injured players? And it's really tough to say. I mean, this Raiders pass rush, it wasn't even good this year with Max Crosby. They're 29th in pressure rate, 20th in adjusted sack rate. Kirk Cousins is a guy you know can beat you if you give him a clean pocket. When given a clean pocket, he averages 8 yards per attempt, 100 passer rating. When pressured, it drops to 7.1 and 60. And look at the turnover-worthy play rate, 8.2%. When pressured, 40th in the NFL. So you put pressure on Kirk Cousins and he will give your defense opportunities to make game-changing plays. Problem is, I don't know if you can count on the Raiders to put any pressure on them in this game. I mean, you'd have to think if you take Max Crosby away from what was already a bad pass rush, I mean, in my opinion, Kirk Cousins should have plenty of clean pockets to throw from in this game. And he's going to be thrown on man coverage and cover 2. That's what the Raiders run most of coverage-wise. Kirk Cousins has solid numbers against man coverage. He's actually 5th in the NFL in yards per pass attempt against man coverage. So if the Raiders are going to try to run man coverage in this game, I mean, Kirk Cousins sitting in a clean pocket. I know the Raiders have a couple of decent corners. I mean, Jack Jones is kind of cool. What's the other guy's name on the other side? Wow, that's embarrassing. Nate Hobbs, I mean, he's all right. The Raiders do have a couple corners, but how long can they hang with Drake London? And even Ray McLeod can make some big plays, especially if Kirk Cousins is sitting in a clean pocket. That coverage just can't hold up forever. So I would imagine Kirk Cousins should have plenty of opportunities to make some big throws against the Raiders man coverage, especially if he's going to be sitting in a clean pocket. Now, if you plan on betting the Raiders in this game, you can point at this. The Raiders do run a lot of cover 2. Kirk Cousins, not great in terms of his numbers against cover 2. 20th in completion percentage, 23rd in yards per attempt, 35th in passer rating. But the thing is, the reason he's 35th in passer rating are the interceptions. He's got 1 touchdown and 7 interceptions this year against cover 2. So you might think, hey, that's a pretty sweet angle for the Raiders. And it is a little bit. The thing is, most of those interceptions came when he was under pressure. And if we don't think he's going to be under much pressure in this game, I'm not really sure if that applies, to be honest. So I mean, Kirk Cousins from clean pockets, I think he should have no problems throwing the ball against the Raiders coverage. Now, what about the Raiders defense against the run? I mentioned before that they have been playing tougher defense against the run, and that is true. From weeks 8 to weeks 13, they were allowing just 85.2 rushing yards per game, just 3.61 yards per carry allowed, 31.8% success rate per rush. They were playing great defense against the run for a 6-week span there. But here's the thing. Number one, last week, it kind of came crumbling down. The Bucs were able to run the ball pretty successfully. on the Raiders, over 5.8 yards per carry, 152 yards on the ground in that game. That's number one. Number two, nobody runs more zone blocking schemes than the Atlanta Falcons. They're first in zone run frequency. The reason that's significant, that plays directly into the weakness of the Raiders defense. They're 27th in yards per carry allowed, 26th in success rate per rush against zone blocking schemes. So I don't really trust the Raiders run defense either. If I'm being honest, Falcons should run the ball. I think Kirk Cousins will have clean boxes to throw from. I like the matchup for the Falcons offense. They should be able to score points in this game. Now, when we flip it over to the other side, I have no freaking idea. I mean, the Raiders offense, 27th in yards per play, 26th in success rate. Obviously, it's a bottom 5 offense. I'm sure you already know that. Now, you might be thinking, well, Kyle, the Falcons defense is terrible, though. And I mean, on the season, they do have some ugly looking numbers. They're 21st in yards per play, 25th in success rate. And as I said before, if you were listening last week, I do think the Raiders will have something of a rushing attack in these last few games. That kid Sincere McCormick looks cool. The offensive line is healthier than it has been all year. So I do think the Raiders do have something that resembles a rushing attack. You look at this graphic, they're dead last across the board when it comes to running the ball. I do think they are able to run the ball a little bit right now, but here's the thing. Atlanta's defense against the run really hasn't even been that bad. In fact, if you just look at the last 4 games, it's been pretty good. 4.4 yards per carry allowed, under 95 rushing yards allowed per game, success rate per rush under 39%. They've actually been playing some solid defense against the run. And remember, this was a good run defense last year. So wouldn't it be completely crazy for the Falcons to have a solid run defense down the stretch here? Their defense against the run really isn't even that bad. So do I really trust the Raiders to run the ball here against the Falcons front 7? Not really. I mean, the way I would trust the Raiders offense a little bit to move the ball in the Falcons would be through the air. Aiden O'Connell throwing the ball to Brock Bowers, Michael Mayer. Thing is, we don't even know, like I said before, we don't even know if Aiden O'Connell's playing. So how the hell could we possibly, this game sucks, man. How can we possibly place a bet on this shit right now? I guess I lean towards the Falcons. If Aiden O'Connell doesn't play and Desmond Ridder is the starting quarterback, I'm in on the Falcons. Anything 7 or less, I'm in on the Falcons. If Aiden O'Connell plays, I might be down to hit an over or a Falcons team total over. I mean, I don't think it's crazy that Aiden O'Connell is able to make some throws and put some points on the board against a Falcons defense I don't think is very good. So if Aiden O'Connell plays, I'll go over. If he doesn't play, as long as the line doesn't go up to 7, I'm down to play the Falcons. That's how I feel about this one. Obviously, as I'm sure you've gathered, don't feel very strongly about it. This game absolutely sucks. So Falcons are over depending on the quarterback situation here. Live show, 4 p.m. Eastern time. We'll go through these 2 games. We'll go through the NBA slate. We'll go through some college basketball, all that. If you're able to make it, we'd love to see you in the comments. Let's have ourselves a good Monday night here. Please remember to bet responsibly. Hit me up in the Discord if you need me.